As someone who has a background in English, it's interesting to see how our language has evolved over time. Like the words 1, 2, 10. That's called etymology. And it's just really interesting to know how these words came into existence and how we use them today and how those words can cross different languages. I appreciate Dr. Tishner so much for sharing his passion for these dead languages with you and our current students. But we're going to end today with a lecture from one of our most popular classes and one of our most popular professors, Dr. Kyle Stevens. Now, Dr. Stevens has a wealth of trivial information that he'll share with anybody. But when you see him next, ask him, how did McDonald's come into play? But today you're going to see a lecture from Dr. Stevens' most popular class and one that's very hard to get into, the Age of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. But what's interesting about this particular presentation, and there's really no other way to preview this lecture than to prepare you to hear about the bromance that played a crucial role in our 20th century history. So I welcome Dr. Stevens.
Hey y'all, good evening. I'm so glad to see you. If you will permit me, I'm going to remove my mask just while I talk to you for a few minutes here. You don't want me hyperventilating, and I want to make sure that you can understand me. I mutter in normal times. I'm so glad to see you back on campus. I mean, not Morgan and not Liliana, but I'm so happy to see the rest of you back on campus. It does my heart good. As I was thinking about what I wanted to talk to you tonight, I thought I would choose one of my favorite lectures from my favorite class that I teach. It's the Age of FDR. And let's just jump in if I can figure out how these things work. Can you guys hear me okay?
Just pull the tape.
Okay. The big three, Roosevelt, Churchill, and Stalin in the middle of World War I. What could be better? Now, the 32nd American president, Franklin Roosevelt, only met the British Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, in August of 1941. August of 1941. England had already been at war for 23 months in September 1939. What we have here is a wartime leader. And what we have here is a peacetime president. They met at a place called Argentia Bay. It's off the coast of Newfoundland, off Canada. It's very pretty, very picturesque, very foggy. And they met on the deck of a mighty British battleship called HMS Prince of Wales. And both men, who were not accustomed to being nervous, were nervous. FDR wanted Churchill, this lion of British history during the last 40 years, to like him. And Churchill really wanted FDR to like him because Churchill really wanted the United States to come into the war. The whole sail over on the Atlantic aboard this ship, Churchill kept changing and rechanging his outfits. He wanted his costume to be just right. And again, he was nervous. He knew that President Roosevelt was head of state, whereas he was just a minister. The king, King George VI, was head of state. But they got along all right. In fact, they got along famously. But again, it was awkward. Great Britain is at war. America is at peace. 5 months later, the situation had totally changed. On December 7th, 1941, the Japanese bombed the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, and Franklin Roosevelt invited Winston Churchill, Prime Minister Churchill, to the White House. What they're doing right now is they're lighting the ceremonial Christmas tree out on the lawn. The President spoke to the people, the Prime Minister spoke to the people, and if you can look closely, you can see one of the most awkward accidental photobombs in American history. Churchill was great that night. He went up, and in that wonderful, melodious, slightly lisping voice that I'm not even going to pretend to imitate, he said, "Let the children have their play. Tomorrow we will get to work to win the war." and they got along absolutely famously. They were both the sons of rich families. Franklin Roosevelt, of course, came from a famous political family. His own fifth cousin, Teddy Roosevelt, had been the 26th president of the United States. Churchill came from royalty, for real royalty. His ancestor had been the Duke of who helped defeat Napoleon in 1815. They absolutely adored each other's company. They got along, they laughed, they drank, they planned for war, they drank, they talked about their past and books they were reading, they drank, they absolutely adored each other's company. And when the press corps was invited in, you could feel the amiability between these two men. You could see that they were absolutely comfortable with each other. Churchill, of course, has his big thick cigar. FDR is chain smoking his cigarettes. You'll notice on his left armband, FDR is wearing a black band of mourning. A few months earlier, in September 1941, his mother, Sarah Delano Roosevelt, had died, and FDR was still feeling the grief. But he was chipper, he was cheering, and you could just see that these two titans of the age were comfortable in each other's presence. Why does that matter? It's not because everyone loves the story of a good bromance, although we do. It's because these two men are going to have to come together to plot a strategy to destroy Hitlerism, to destroy the Third Reich and Imperial Japan. The reporters marveled at how they just seemed to get along. They would almost, but not quite, finish each other's sentences. But the big moment of this 3-week visit in December 1941 came the day after Christmas, when the Prime Minister of Great Britain delivered a speech before a joint session of Congress. Churchill, who again didn't get all that nervous all that often, this is someone who learned to fly at the age of 40 and crashed more airplanes than I have fingers. He was feeling it at this moment. Now, you'll notice this doesn't quite look like the House chamber, those of you who are interested in political history, and it wasn't the House chamber, it was the Senate chamber. You've got Vice President Henry A. Wallace up here on the right, Winston Churchill here in front of all the cameras. It's December 26, 1941. Most of Congress, despite the bombing of Pearl Harbor, had gone home for the holidays. And it would be a tremendous humiliation for President Roosevelt if the Prime Minister of Great Britain spoke before a joint session of Congress and there were empty seats. So very cleverly, very quietly, they put the Prime Minister in the Senate chamber. Instead of 435 seats to fill, there are only 96. The place was packed, and that more intimate setting of the Senate chamber made it kind of more fun. It made it more intimate. It made it easier to laugh. And this is what Churchill said in part. The fact that my American forebears have for so many generations played their part in the life of the United States, and that here I am, an Englishman, welcomed in your midst, makes this experience one of the most moving and thrilling in my life, which is already long and has not been entirely uneventful. To say that his life had not been entirely uneventful is the understatement of the 20th century. When he was a young man, a young cavalry officer in Africa, he saw some of the bloodiest conflicts of British colonialism. He was captured by the Dutch in South Africa during the Boer War at the turn of the 20th century. He had served as head of the Admiralty in England during World War I for a time, served as a lieutenant colonel in charge of one of the great regiments, the Royal Scots Fusiliers, one of the great regiments in British military history, on the front lines, in the trenches during World War I, never got a scratch. But this is the most thrilling moment, he says, of his life. And he says, "I wish indeed that my mother, who was an American, whose memory I cherish across the veil of years, could be here to see. By the way, I cannot help reflecting that if my father had been American and my mother British, instead of the other way around, I might have got here, that is, before Congress, on my own," slyly hinting that if his parents had been reversed, he might be president of the United States, and they just loved it. He was charming, he was friendly, he was a great writer, and when it was over, he flashed his famous V for victory sign. Perhaps a childish gesture, but it was what the American Congress and the American people needed just 3 weeks after the shock of Pearl Harbor. Later, writing his memoirs, Churchill wrote, "It was with heart stirrings that I fulfilled the invitation to address the Congress of the United States. The occasion was important for what I was sure was the all-conquering alliance of the English-speaking peoples." He adored that phrase, the English-speaking peoples. Churchill loved the United States. He loved American history. He knew all about Lincoln. He had read all about the American Civil War. The English-speaking peoples. For 2 years, for 2.25 years, Winston Churchill had been holding on, waiting, praying. What was Churchill's war strategy? To hold out until the Americans could get in. He was positively giddy. "Yet to me," said Churchill, "who could trace unbroken male descent on my mother's side through 5 generations from a lieutenant who served in George Washington's army, it was possible to feel a blood right to speak to the representatives of the great republic and our common cause." Another phrase that he used again and again. Whenever American reporters, American journalists would say, Mr. Churchill, what's our goal?" He would mention the common cause, letting the American people know, not too subtly, we're all in this together. And what a grand time they had for 3 weeks. You can see the intimacy. You can see the comradeship here. This is not something you can fake. Churchill is not entirely sober. Roosevelt is at a rare moment of ease, at a rare moment of being comfortable with other people. Franklin Roosevelt is a wonderful personality, and an incredibly complicated personality. He never let you see what was inside. He couldn't let you see what was inside. He was psychically conditioned from a very early age to have a mask on. I might as well tell you the story real quick. His father died. His father was much older than his mother, and his father died when he was young. And that trauma, that experience of losing his father when he was just 18, made him always want to make sure everyone in the room was happy. He wanted to make sure you were comfortable. He wanted to make sure well, not you, but he wanted to make sure everyone in the room was comfortable, was happy. And so he had a mask on all the time. Google any image you want of FDR. And you'll see that his face is alive. It's animated. He's expressing interest, amusement, happiness. You rarely see his face relaxed, but you see it around Winston Churchill. By the way, the man had an enormous head. His head was absolutely gigantic. This is King George VI of England, and this is President Roosevelt. The mole over his eyebrow is almost the size of the king's eye. He had this massive head, did FDR, and he also had a massive body. His upper body strength was absolutely formidable. Had been a great athlete back in the day before he caught polio in the summer of 1921. They are not entirely sober. And here's the thing, Ben Franklin once famously said, "Fish and guests stink after 3 days." Prime Minister Churchill did not wear out his welcome quite that quick. He was so charming, and he was so likable, and he was so alive. You've never seen anyone more in love with being Winston Churchill than Winston Churchill. So he didn't wear out his welcome after 3 days, but like 11 days? The man never woke up before 11 a.m. in his life if he could help it. For 75 years, he always had alcohol in his bloodstream. He was a great manic force. And Franklin Roosevelt, who was 8 years younger, just cannot keep up. I mean, he looks like he is about to collapse. What are they there to do? They're there to talk about the war. When do we invade France? How do we do it? When do we invade France? How do we do it? 1942, it's never going to happen. We don't have the planes, the ships. the men. 1943, can we invade France? Can we liberate France? In 1943, that's tough. 1944, maybe. What's the goal? To liberate France, not just because of the French, but to take pressure off the Russians in the East on the Eastern Front. How do we keep the Russians engaged in the war, killing Germans, long enough for us to get a foothold in Europe? They don't know. All the stuff we know now, they didn't know back then. But what FDR did know is that he is exhausted. Harry Hopkins, Franklin Roosevelt's number one aide, his number one lieutenant during the war, the closest thing Franklin Roosevelt had to a best friend, but not a best friend, Harry Hopkins said this: "The Prime Minister's sleeping arrangements have now become quite promiscuous. He talks with the President until 2 a.m. and consequently spends a large part of the day hurling himself in and out of bed, bathing at unsuitable moments, and rushing up and down corridors in his dressing gown." Speaking of dressing gown, one time FDR in his wheelchair wheeled himself in to the Prime Minister's room in the White House, on the second floor of the White House. And FDR didn't know that Churchill liked to think in the tub. He liked to think in the tub. He took 9 baths a day. For 90 years he took baths, but he never once learned to draw the bath water himself. But he loved bathing. He would sit in the tub and he would write, or sometimes he would dictate letters or dictate speeches. He just liked to be in the water. And once in the middle of the afternoon, when you wouldn't expect to see a grown man in a tub, FDR wheels himself in. Churchill is in a bathrobe, still hot and pink from his bath. And they start talking. FDR is like, "I'm sorry, I didn't know you were in the tub. This is awkward, let me back up." Churchill takes a step to the side, and he accidentally stepped on, the little cord that ties the bathrobe. He accidentally stepped on the cord, and the whole silk bathrobe just slid from his shoulders, just like that. And there stood Churchill in all of his pink glory. FDR wanted to die. And Churchill, cool as a cucumber, said, "As you can see, Mr. President, the Prime Minister of Great Britain has nothing to hide from the President of the United States." And he totally salvaged the situation. That said, FDR is losing it. He wants this man to go home. He says to the Labor Secretary, Frances Perkins, the first female cabinet member in American history, by the way, he says, "I'm nearly dead. I have to talk to the Prime Minister all night," and he gets bright ideas in the middle of the night and comes pattering down the hall to my bedroom in his bare feet. They are probably good ideas, but I have to have my sleep. That's at Christmas time, 1941. "14 months later, in early 1943, the two wartime leaders meet at Casablanca in Morocco, in unoccupied French Morocco, to hammer out the final strategy of the war. And everyone knows what that strategy is going to be. 2 words: unconditional surrender. By the way, do you want to see the most adorable photograph of your life? If you think that's not precious, you are not human. They instantly rekindled that old affection between them, hanging out. When reporters would ask them questions, FDR would whisper into Churchill's ear, "What are they talking about? We don't know. We just know that we're not in the inner circle, and they are. How cool are they?" And while the conference in Casablanca was going on, Churchill had been eyeing a 60-foot-high tower that was outside their villa where they were staying. And the whole time during the 10 days of the conference, or however long it was, Churchill kept saying, "I wish we could get Roosevelt up there. I wish he could see the view from up there." And Churchill, behind Roosevelt's back, got 2 Secret Service agents to agree to carry the president in the fireman carry up 60 steps to the top of this tower, because Churchill wanted Roosevelt to see the view. And this is one of my favorite photographs of the 20th century. As I said, FDR's face was always illuminated. He could be crying tears, but if you came across him, he would put on a happy face. It was just the way he was wired. But his face is relaxed. He doesn't look cool, he doesn't look dignified, but he looks authentic. And then look at Churchill. What's that look on Churchill's face as he stares at his friend, the American president? Two questions. What in the world is Roosevelt staring at that's got him mesmerized? And what's that look on Churchill's face? I'll come back to that. When FDR left, he was the first president to fly while in office. The first president to fly after he left office was the 26th president, FDR's fifth cousin, Franklin Roosevelt. But FDR was the first president to fly while president. Churchill said, "Come, let us go home. I don't like to see them take off. It makes me far too nervous. If anything happened to that man, I couldn't stand it. He is the truest friend. He has the farthest vision. He is the greatest man I've ever known." Churchill was one, for all his many flaws, was one of the most eclectic and brilliant people who had ever lived, but Churchill had a very rough 8 years between 1932, when he was basically expelled from politics. He was ostracized from the British cabinet, until 1940, when he came in as the prime minister after the Nazis invaded France and Belgium and Holland. During those 8 years, between 1932 and 1940, Churchill found solace in painting. Churchill was one of those hyperactive, manic, memorable individuals who suffered from a deep, deep depression. Sometimes people are like this in human history. Abraham Lincoln suffered from melancholy, although not as bad as Churchill. Teddy Roosevelt suffered from a deep depression, which is why he was always so active. Churchill called his depression the black dog. And whenever he wrote it, he would capitalize the B, capitalize the black dog is coming. I can feel the black dog on my heels. And one day in 1915, when he was still a young man of just 41, yes, 41 is still young, when he was fired from his job as First Lord of the Admiralty, Churchill was in the blackest, darkest depression of his life. The man who had to be in the arena had lost his career, he thought, for good. This is in 1915. And he was sulking in the garden one day. And he saw his sister-in-law painting with watercolors. He knew he wanted something to occupy his time. He needed to keep the depression at bay. He tried stamp collecting, hated it. Tried golf, absolutely hated it. Called the game of golf chasing a quinine pill around a cow pasture. A quinine pill is what they gave you for malaria back in the day, so you know what he thought of that. And Churchill took up his sister-in-law's watercolors and found he liked it. So he sent his wife to the store. He's not going to use puny watercolors. Oil on canvas, nothing but the best for this guy. And he started to paint. Painted hundreds of pictures in his life, maybe thousands. Hundreds of pictures in his life, but only one during World War II. Only one painting between 1939 and 1945. What's FDR looking at? Moroccan mountains covered in snow, 12,000 feet high. What's the look on Churchill's face? It's love. This is what he painted for his friend, Franklin Roosevelt. He's pretty good, right? The intimacy in Washington in December 1941, the intimacy at Casablanca in January 1943, but there's a problem, and it's in Moscow. FDR knows that Russians are killing 9 out of 10 German soldiers. It is absolutely imperative to keep the monstrous dictator, Joseph Stalin, happy. Russia got out of World War I. Russia made a separate peace in 1917. That cannot be allowed to happen again. FDR has to keep the Russians in the war indefinitely. Stalin might be a worse mass murderer than Hitler, as awkward as that sounds, but he was our mass murderer. And FDR had to be a cold-hearted politician looking at the big picture. Who's this scrawny-looking chap here? That's Harry Hopkins, the Commerce Secretary, who was the closest thing FDR had to a best friend. Stalin did not like anybody, and he did not trust Americans. But he got along with the sickly, cadaverous, chain-smoking Hopkins. Both Hopkins and Stalin were great smokers, maybe that's why they got along. But Harry Hopkins reported back to Roosevelt, "It is absolutely critical that we settle on a date for the invasion of France to keep the Soviets in the war." Why? I'm not even going to read all of these to you, but I'll read a few. 1,700 cities and towns destroyed, 7,000 villages, 6 million buildings, 31,000 factories, 1,100 coal mines, 3,000 oil wells, 40,000 miles of railroad track, 56,000 miles of roads, countless farms, trucks, tractors, millions and millions of head of livestock, and a minimum of 20 million human beings. It's easy for Americans to forget that we lost 400,000 people in World War II. The Soviets lost a minimum of 20 million. It might have been 25 million. Hopkins knew that, FDR knew that, and when all three of them finally got together in December 1943 at Tehran in Persia, in Iran, somehow FDR had to make the transition from being Churchill's best friend to being Stalin's closest ally. Winston Churchill, born 1874. In 1943, he turned 69 years old during the Tehran conference. All Churchill wanted was for his friend Roosevelt to stay with him, Churchill, at the British Embassy in Tehran and celebrate his birthday together. Franklin Roosevelt instead chose to stay with Joseph Stalin at the Soviet Embassy, because the Russians were far more important at this point in the war than the British. FDR is literally leaning towards Stalin, perhaps subliminally saying, "We're allies, we're comrades, we're together." Happy Churchill? Sad Churchill. And to learn the rest of the story, I guess you're going to have to take my FDR class next fall. See you guys.
So you learned about the bromance. And that's just one thing you'll learn from a faculty member like Dr. Stevens. And there's so many of them here at the Louisiana School who can offer you pieces of information that when you pull them together, it makes you really appreciate what happened in the United States and what has formed us to what we are today. So again, Dr. Stevens, I really appreciate the time you spent with us today. Now I want to especially thank Mr. Mike Sumner from Enrollment Services, and all of you know Mike because he's the one that's been working with you all over this past semester, sharing his experiences about the Louisiana School, both as an Enrollment Services professional, but also as a graduate of the school himself. But Mike is the one who spearheaded this project. He is the one who created the question and answer session, or panel if you want to call it today, that included some of our very tired students who just had gone through a 4-hour test. But Mike also put together this 4.5-hour presentation that you've watched today. So I promise you that you gave 4.5 hours to a great experience, and I promise you that you did not miss a good nap. It was worth watching Mike, Dr. Stevens, Dr. Langford, all of our professors share their passion for this Louisiana School experience. Now, we're leaving you after 4.5 hours of a lot of information very fast. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to take all of this and absorb it in one sitting. It's virtual. You can watch this over and over again. But as you're watching it, and if there's things that make you wonder, and you just like, is this something I want to learn more about? Jot it down. Call our admissions office, ask to speak to one of our admissions counselors, and we'll get you that answer. And if that involves rounding up a faculty member in one of our disciplines to give you more information about course offerings that the Louisiana School will be providing over the next year, we'll take care of that too. Moms and dads, if you're still concerned about this experience and you want to talk to us more about living arrangements, you want to talk to us more about food, give us a call in the admissions office. We have got great things going on at the Louisiana School, and next year it'll even be better when you look behind the school and you see that huge building that we're calling our Living and Learning Commons area. Your students will have a chance to share in that experience because they'll be the first group to live in the residence hall. Thank you all for participating in our Exploration Day. As soon as it is possible to get you back on this campus, we're going to do it. We miss you all as much as you miss us. The experiences here as a state residential school cannot be compared to any other school. We're doing our best to keep you safe, to keep you well, and to keep us well. And when we get back here as a family, I can assure you that we will be safe and we will be well, and you will have one of the best educational experiences that you could have ever dreamed of having at the Louisiana School for Math, Science, and the Arts. Have a great evening.